My name is George Thrush. I head the School of Architecture here at Northeastern. And this course is Understanding Design. I hope that's the one you signed up for. And this is a course that's, I think, going to be a lot of fun. It was the first time we taught it, and which was last spring. And we're doing the same format again this time. How many of you have seen a little bit about this course on the web already? Good, okay. Our intention, full disclosure, is to run this class a few times, maybe only these 2 times, live in front of an audience like this. And meanwhile, we're audio and videotaping every class. And as you may know, the format for this class is that, with the exception of today, where I'm going to give you a presentation to kind of lay the groundwork for the course, the format for the course is that we have a different guest every single class. And these different guests are all leading designers broadly understood. And I think it's really important for you to understand that. What I mean is, this is not a course where you're just going to be meeting nothing but architects. By no means is that true. In fact, I think there are maybe 2 architects on the agenda this term. Instead, there are people who design all kinds of things. You know, our first guest is Henrik Fisker, the great automobile designer, one of the best automobile designers in the world, on Monday, which is going to be fantastic. Right after that, we have Barbara Lynch, who is one of the most successful restaurant entrepreneurs in all of Boston. And you might think, excuse me, wait a minute, how is somebody who runs a restaurant a designer? And the answer is that what I hope is going to be the biggest takeaway for you in this class, which is that design is really a way of thinking. It is a way of solving complicated problems. It's a way of taking on things that are difficult, not things that are easy. It's a way of taking on things that don't have a single right answer. By the way, I can think of no greater distinction between high school and college than that. In high school, if you give the answer back to the teacher that is pretty much the one they wanted you to give, you'll do well, right? We all saw this. You all probably saw it fairly recently. The students who did really badly in high school, they refused to do that. They refused to hand back to the teacher what the teacher asked for. But the kinds of problems you'll be facing in this class, or the kinds of problems you'll be listening to people talk about solving in this class and explaining to you in this class, are complicated problems. They don't have a single right answer because they have a whole bunch of variables. And these problems, sometimes they're problems of designing and building a house, in which case we'll be talking to an architect. Sometimes they're problems about communication, of complicated data and information, in which case we'll be talking to information designers. Sometimes it will be about the design of an experience. And if you've ever been to a Starbucks or an Apple store, for example, or lots of other things, Walt Disney World or an airline, you know that you have experienced a whole series of events that have been choreographed by somebody. That is, somebody actually thought about what your experience would be as you entered Walt Disney World, or as you entered the waiting lounge for American Airlines, or as you entered the Apple store, or as you entered Starbucks. Those were designed experiences. In other words, it didn't just work out that way. Somebody thought about it and actually tested it and tried multiple iterations and ended up with a series of events that are, in a way, transparent for you. You get to just go in to Starbucks and you aren't really fully cognizant of the fact that you're passing certain products for sale that are very precisely choreographed to where you are in line. But it's true. That is really, really thought out. Those are designed experiences. What Barbara Lynch does in the restaurant world is designs an experience for you. Sure, it includes food, but it's not limited to food. There are a lot of other things. And what is very interesting, I think, about this course is you're going to see all of these different designers, just an incredible range of people. They're going to come in and talk for 20 or 30 minutes about what they do, give a PowerPoint talk about what it is they do, and then we're going to sit down and I'm going to interview them. And we're going to try to tease out common themes. We're going to try to tease out so that you can use in your evolution as a thinking person, you can use some of the skills that these designers have really mastered. And whether you are an engineering student, or a health student, or a business student, or an architecture student, or whatever you're studying, I think this is super helpful because it gives you an insight into how positive and innovative change happens in the world. It doesn't just happen. It happens intentionally. And one of the things I think we talk about a lot in architecture is intentionality, that you can actually do things on purpose. You know what I mean? You don't just build your house and say, step back and go, oh, huh, that's what it looks like. No, you can very carefully predict what things will be like, how much they'll cost, and how difficult they are to build, and all the rest. So design is a really interesting thing, and I hope that I can help you to understand it in this course. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to give you a bit of an overview for the course. But before we get started, are there any questions logistically? Like, you all know the course is on Blackboard. Everybody know how to use Blackboard? If you don't, we have one of our two TAs here. Anybody not know how to use Blackboard? Okay, it's pretty straightforward, I think. We will be uploading the PowerPoint talks of myself and our guests quite regularly. I don't want to promise instantaneously, but they'll be very quickly up. And ultimately, the whole content of this course will be online. In other words, you'll be, like, when this term is over, you'll be able to go back and look not just at the PowerPoints, but at the presentations themselves. As you probably know, you can go to, gosh, and I don't have the link right in front of me. We'll post it on the Blackboard site, the link for last year's course. How many of you have been to that site, the site from last spring semester's version of Understanding Design? Wow, hardly anybody. Okay, well, it's great because if you want to see what some of these will be like, we've had just an incredibly wide range of people. We have everybody from an Emmy Award-winning songwriter, and you might say, well, how is that designed? Well, if you think about just even the two variables in songwriting, words and lyrics, which one do you start with, and then which one do you try to stuff in and make work after you did the first one? But actually, there's a bunch of other things. This guy, Brad Hatfield, has written songs for productions that involve lots of other stories. They're part of Broadway shows or part of movies. He's done songs for Iron Man and all these other things where he's got to solve a number of problems, not just communicate the emotional character of a song maybe, but have it be a song that goes along with the other songs that are in the show that he didn't write, that carry the character of the movie and help develop that. There's a number of boxes he needs to check off, so I'm really looking forward to that conversation. But I think when you look at the syllabus is posted online, and the Blackboard site has been live for 2 or 3 hours, so you can all get to it now, I think, if you were trying to get to it before, it's just gone live. And so most of what you need to know is there. I should introduce, this is Kelly Lynch over here, who's one of our two TAs. Laura Coyne is also going to join us as a TA a bit later, probably for the next class. Their email links are both on the Blackboard site, so you can reach out to them as well as me. Any questions? Okay. Don't worry. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be the most fun course you take this semester. If it's not, I want to know about it, and we'll make it more fun. Okay. So I want to start with a pretty reasonable question. What do we mean by design? And I've in my casual opening remarks, I have started to allude to some of this, but I'm going to try to give you a bit more information. One of the things we mean by design is conceiving a vision. That is, imagining a place that you want to get to. And that's a lot of what how designers act as leaders in the world. You know, famously, Steve Jobs was obsessed with design, the late CEO of Apple Computer. He was obsessed with design, designing not only products, but earlier in his career, he wanted to design the factories in which the products were made so that there was this perfect design environment, even if you didn't see it as the customer, through which the product passed from conception to construction to sale and use. For the engineers in the audience, the notion of reverse engineering, I think, is really a powerful one in design. That is, when you see a thing that already exists, and you say, wow, that's really cool. I wonder how they did that. How many of you have ever, like, you know, when you were a kid maybe, or with your parent in a garage, taken apart something to see how it works? How many of you have done that? Okay, so that's part of the process of reverse engineering. How the hell did they get to this place? And you want to figure it out. And that's important because if you conceive a vision, you have to work your way back. How do I start the process to get to such a vision? So the reverse engineering is helpful in that. I think design is also fundamentally a holistic rather than piecemeal enterprise. What I mean by that is many of us focus on problems that we need to solve one at a time. I'll figure out where I'm going to store the paint in the garage first, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do with the lawnmowers, then I'm going to figure out if we can fit the cars in and so forth, rather than thinking about the whole enterprise as one problem. And we'll get to more on that. Sorry, I can solve lots and lots of problems. The one problem I can't solve is how to get my Google updater to stop interfering with my computer. So if anybody knows how to solve that problem, you'll get an enormous amount of extra credit and my lifelong appreciation. And finally, I would say, and this is an informal, back of the envelope, start of the conversation list of what do we mean by design, but almost all good design solves more than one problem at a time. And I'll show you what I mean in multiple examples here. But it solves more than one problem at a time. In many ways, that's the hallmark of a great design, is one that can solve multiple problems in one move. It's about efficiency, and that efficiency can then lead to simplicity, and aesthetically can lead to what we might call elegance. Anybody ever seen this before? What is it? Yeah, the logo, it's a riff on the formal logo for IBM, the great computer company, done by probably the most famous graphic designer of logos, commercial logos in American history, Paul Rand. This is the real logo. So obviously this one is, in case you don't maybe know what IBM is, you can just kind of figure it out. But this, you might say, okay, first of all, I've got a number of questions here, Professor Thrush. Why is this a great logo? Well, I could come up with a logo for IBM. Why is this one better than mine? And actually, unlike other things that may seem to be matters of taste, there's a real correct answer here, which is this is not, first of all, what is the task of a logo? You know, the answer is that the task of a logo is to communicate not just what the company is, but to distinguish it from its competitors, and also, at its best, to embody some essential qualities of the company. Okay? So, what are some of those qualities? Well, remember, this IBM logo was done a long time ago. This was, probably in the 50s, late 50s. And how did computers work then? Please, you're more than welcome to come on in if you like. They worked with punch cards. And punch cards, it's hard to believe, of course. Computers were just so unbelievably not powerful back then. Your watch, you know all this. Your watch today is way more powerful than the biggest room full of computers was then. My parents, by the way, were both IBMers, so I was steeped in this from a young age. But the punch card was the absolute, you know, it was the symbol in a way of the new computer age, because it was how information got fed into the computer. You know, you could type information into a machine, it would translate it into this punch card code, and then you fed the cards into the machine, which looked like this. But, so why does that make this a great logo? Well, it communicates the core identity of the company, I think, which is that it's organized, that it's fast. Think about the days when making financial calculations meant putting on a green eye shade, getting out a bunch of giant ledger-sized graph paper, a pencil. I remember watching my dad do this, by the way. You know, putting a whole bunch of figures, hoping you didn't make a math error in your list of, you know, 55 numbers that you were adding or subtracting or whatever. So the introduction of these punch cards was obviously a massive revolution. So it was about speed. It was about the nature of the machine doing it, not just speed, but that a machine was doing this. It was about the notion of systems, that there were things that were connected, and the enormous, limitless scale that the computer afforded you. So the logo really, that IBM logo, I think, really does communicate those things, and that's why it's a great logo. By the way, if you're interested, you can Google Paul Rand logos, and you'll see how many of the logos that you know best in commercial America were designed by this one guy, because it's not just IBM. ABC, Westinghouse, lots of stuff. So what is design? You know, I'm going to offer another, you know, half-cooked preliminary description or definition. It's a way of overlapping the solutions to more than one problem into a coherent and often beautiful whole. This question about problem solving and beauty is an interesting one, because oftentimes, maybe before you sign up for this class, or maybe even as you walk in today, we think of design as that's the realm for artists. I mean, other people don't do design. That's for artists. But no, I would not say that is entirely true. Certainly, artists are often steeped very well with a sensibility about design, but design is about relationships. It's about coordinating things. It's about integrating things. You remember the slide I showed you about a kind of holistic rather than a piecemeal approach. Integrating the solutions to lots of things is what design is about. Why does it matter? Okay, that's a perfectly reasonable question. Because there are, as we know, by the way, we are facing some massive problems in our society. Rising oceans is one of them, but there are lots of others that seem intractable sometimes. But the ability to think like a designer, I think, will help you and others in your generation to think about these challenges more holistically. Because, as I say here, there are a lot of complicated problems to solve, and we have to do more than one thing at a time. We can't just solve them piecemeal. So how do we get there? How do we learn how to be designers, or how do we learn how to understand design? Thankfully, you've enrolled in this course, and that's what this course is about. So let's do a little bit of logistics to get started. We have, you know when the course meets. It'll be in here. Try to get here, please try to get here on time. Sometimes we'll be released early, but please try to get here on time because we have guests and they have tight schedules. Please make sure you're in your seat by 11:45. I know that some of you have classes that end at 11:35. That's what jogging is for, okay? Race over here, get your seat down near the front, and we'll get started right away, okay? As I said, Kelly Lynch is one of our TAs. I haven't added Laura Coyne's name as the other. Metrics. So this is a word we're going to use in this course in other contexts, but the kind you're concerned with right now is, okay, how am I going to get an A in this class? Well, there's several opportunities for grading. There'll be writing assignments. Actually, I'm going to correct this number. There's going to be 3 short writing assignments and 1 quiz. I'm sorry, I should have corrected this slide. That's what it says on your syllabus, and that's what's correct. So, the quiz will be done in an online way. The writing assignments will be submitted and graded and returned to you. But all of that will be done through Blackboard. Have you all handed in written work through the so-called Turnitin portal? Has anybody not done that? It's okay if you haven't. Okay, we will go over that and make sure that you understand that in advance of the first assignment, which is going to be in about a week or 10 days. So it's not complicated, but you do have to do it correctly, and so we'll make sure that you know how to do that. In fact, maybe we're going to finish before our class time today, and let's, why don't you, if you want help, why don't you come see Kelly, and we'll set something up that's mutually convenient to do that. And of course, the site is at blackboard.nu.edu. All of the PowerPoints will be uploaded. I don't think we have any proprietary information issues this time. There was one, so I think everything will be uploaded. Oh, right. Okay. Also come to class on time. So, quickly, why does, I want to get to some examples for you. Why does design matter? Well, it matters aesthetically, of course. It matters emotionally, and you're going to find that this is very meaningful and very powerful and not kind of some squishy thing you don't have to pay attention to. It's very important, the ability of design to get you emotionally connected with things. It, of course, matters commercially. For the business students in here, design is probably the greatest value added that an economy like the United States adds to the sort of product chain globally. Intellectually, design matters because it provides clarity and precision and order. It matters operationally if you think about supply chain management, or if you think about just-in-time delivery and that sort of business. Those are designed enterprises that, that help us in efficiency and so forth. It matters experientially, and this is what Steve Jobs and Howard Schultz at Starbucks would tell you, in that if you are comfortable going to my store, you will come to my store and you'll come back a lot. But also it matters personally, and I suppose I should, as a matter of full disclosure, share that this course is not the only course, the only point of view about design that exists in the world. I think it is one that has a number of universals in it, but it's my take, and you should know that. In other words, there are other people would have different points of view. Fortunately, you're going to see 23 other points of view over the course of this semester, so it won't just be me. So let's talk about design. This is a pretty darn well-designed thing right here, okay? An apple, it doesn't get much better than this. It's a taut, resistant, resilient container that can withstand drops on the ground and still protect its bounty inside. It lasts for a while, and it's simple and beautiful. So if you wonder why people like to name things after this, I think that's why. This is one of nature's best designed things. One of the reasons that we like the way an apple is designed is there's something satisfying about the purity of a circle. A circle, it doesn't have a front, it doesn't have a back, it looks great from every perspective. Wouldn't we all like to be like a circle in this way? Maybe there's some other ways we wouldn't like to be like a circle, but there are some ways we would. That is, we'd look great from all points of view. As it is, we kind of have to be very careful about that. This is one of a few architectural examples, and so most of you aren't going to know what in God's name this is. This is an 18th century piece of architectural fantasy by Etienne Boulet. This was designed to be a memorial or a monument to Isaac Newton. And of course, during the Enlightenment, there weren't too many bigger or more important characters than Isaac Newton. This guy was like, okay, you just invented you just explained the entire world. So we're really impressed by you, so we're going to build a giant monument to you. So this is called the Newton Cenotaph. And the idea, by the way, was that it was really big. Do you see the little tiny things near the asterisks down there? Those are people. Okay, so this was designed to be a gigantic sphere. Why? Because on the inside of the gigantic sphere would be projected all of the heavens. So you could walk inside this, and the Newtonian universe would be visible to you. Pretty cool. Just as an aside, if you ever want to go through something just like this, over at the Christian Science Church, how many of you have been to the Maparium? Anybody? Okay, then most of you are missing out on a really cool thing. Does it cost any money to get in? Maybe $5 at most, if maybe nothing. Walk over to the Christian Science Church, and there's an administration building. Inside, there's a room, and you can walk through it. It's a spherical room, and it has a map of the world, but instead of being on the outside, it's on the inside, and so you can occupy the world. It's quite interesting. But lots of things are well designed, and lots of things solve more than one problem. This is an incredible pencil sharpener from the 1930s, designed by the great American designer Raymond Loewy, who also designed Studebaker automobiles and lots of other things. But if you ask, well, this seems like it's solving only one problem. It's sharpening pencils. What's the big hairy deal about this? Well, the answer is it is capturing the spirit of the age, the kind of streamlined, high-tech, high-speed spirit of the 1930s, while also serving as a pencil sharpener. If you ever go across the river, you may see this sign. This is just across the Charles River in Cambridge, and it is, of course, the logo for the Shell Oil Company. Another kind of absolutely unforgettable commercial image that has represented that brand for 50 years or more. This is interesting. When you think about a car, that's not really what you think of. We're going to talk about cars a bit more in a second. This is an idea for a streamlined car from that same 1930s era by the designer Norman Bell Geddes in 1933. And the idea is a vehicle to carry lots of people at a high speed. Now, this was never actually really developed as a vehicle, but was a vision, an idea that he hoped automobile designers would execute. This you may be a bit more familiar with. The Segway, right? Say what you want, and I think one of the inventors of the Segway recently met an untimely end by accidentally driving his Segway off of a cliff. But be that as it may, it doesn't take away from the excellent design of this thing, which really is an attempt to mimic the way you actually, it's very much like the interface with an Apple computer, which has been made incredibly intuitive. This, the Segway, is an incredibly intuitive way of getting around. Have anybody ever ridden on a Segway in here? So you know what I mean. It's intended, I don't know if it really works as intended, but it's intended to be as close to an intuitive means of transport as you can get. And so whatever else you might think about these, for example, as an urban resident in Boston with narrow sidewalks, if I see one on the sidewalk, I want to knock their head in. But still, it's a really smart design idea because it is solving a particular problem extremely well, right? The idea that you could, well, some people might say, I'm not sure that the problem in America is that we're walking too much, but put that aside for a moment and say that if you were working at a giant UPS factory, or warehouse that was 300 yards long and your job was to walk up and down and get a small package here and there, this would be a pretty helpful invention. Anybody ever seen this before? Yes, somebody must have. You have. Really? Not many? It's maybe the greatest lounge chair ever invented. And you might say, what a subjective assessment. I like my lounge chair better. Why is this so great? Number one, I suggest sit in it for 6 minutes and then tell me, first of all, if you ever plan to get up. But also, it's by Charles and Ray Eames, a husband and wife team, one of the greatest teams of designers in American history. But they were pioneers in molding plywood, which is what, this is really soft cushions embedded in molded plywood. We're really used to seeing molded plywood these days, but this was a great innovation around the time of the Second World War. And it's interesting because this chair is all about comfort, whereas this chair, the Rietveld chair, designed by a great Dutch architect in the early part of the 20th century named Gerrit Rietveld, is about a lot of things, but being comfortable is not one of them, okay? Look at this chair and tell me if you'd like to sit for 2 or 3 hours and watch a movie in this chair. It is hard, it is unforgiving, it is a little bit Calvinist in its judgment of you. It is really a three-dimensional painting more than it is anything else. It has an aesthetic agenda, and the fact that you sit in it is kind of incidental. So we're going to get to this issue in a second, but one of the things that we're going to learn about design is it's really one of the big issues is what problem are you trying to solve? What do you see as the primary question that you're trying to answer? Because, by the way, what designers do is move up the decision-making food chain to where they question the question. Just because you get assigned something, especially if you're a designer, if you're in engineering or in business or in architecture or anything like this, just because you're assigned something does not mean that you're being asked the right question. You might very well add much more value to the conversation by going back and talking with the person who asked you to solve this thing. You know, I'm not sure you're asking the right question. Let's zoom out a little bit and see if we can't ask a better question. And then we may get a much better result. Anybody ever seen a car like this? Have you ever been to there's a little car museum called the Lars Anderson Car Museum in Brookline, Massachusetts. Anybody been to it? Yes. It's fantastic. And part of their permanent collection are these incredible vehicles. I think this one is a Messerschmitt, or it might be a BMW. After the Second World War, after Germany had been bombed to smithereens, and they had a tiny bit of their industrial capacity still extant, and that industrial capacity was still really about making airplanes, right? That's what they were desperately trying to do, making airplanes and tanks, not domestic residential vehicles. So one of the first things they turned out, and more than one company did this, were these little cars that were kind of like the cockpit of an airplane with wheels on the bottom so that they could use some of the industrial capacity they had to meet a new need. They had factories that were designed to build fighter airplanes, and then the war was over and they needed to provide transportation for lots and lots of people, and this was the way they kind of solved that problem. It's a different problem than we have today, let's say, in the automotive industry. But it's interesting because it helps you to see that not all solutions are the same because not all the problems are the same. This is a great turn of the century, not the most recent one, but the 19th to the 20th century rocking chair called a Thonet rocker, which takes a design motif and turns it into the mechanism for doing something else, which is making a rocking chair. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, the first thing here is a kind of aesthetic sketch. The second thing is, what can we use that for? Hey, I've got an idea. We'll make it a rocking chair. The curve came first, not second. This used to be a kind of forward-looking movie. Now I suppose it's a bit of historical reference. This is, of course, your good friend Tom Cruise. But what he's in front of is, I think this is from the film Minority Report. And what is interesting is it might have been the first image of the idea of this completely interactive touchscreen, which we know in reality now and is ubiquitous in films. But I think this movie might have come out around 2005, maybe. So it was a while ago now, almost 10 years ago. And I would call this staking out a vision of the future. It maybe didn't work yet, but this was kind of, let's try to work our way back to how do we get to this point. Just some other interesting bits of design. This is design before the Dutch went on the euro. This is their guilder, I believe, and it's just it's a stunning piece of design for lots of reasons. But currency design is really interesting because it's solving lots of problems, representing national identity, being legible, let's say, to people with visual impairment. So you can tell maybe by the bill size or surface which one is worth how much money and so forth. Also, you don't want to be able to be easily counterfeited and so forth. So there's a lot of problems to solve, and they did so in a very beautiful way here. This, of course, is one of our most innovative reference points in contemporary design, the mouse. And the interchangeability of the mouse. I've always found the notion of metaphor to be very powerful in design, and I think thinking of the interface with a computer as something simple like a mouse always struck me as genius. Silverware. This is designed by Arne Jacobsen, and it's incredible. This seems very distended, this image. Does it seem incredibly long on that screen? I think it does. It's really long and elegant. I don't think it's that long and skinny, though. Sorry, there's something wrong with that image. Here is a chair, the so-called womb chair designed by Jacobsen. Again, I don't need to tell you in a way why that's an interesting design idea. Just the name of it, the idea of this is not just a place to sit, this is a place to be cocooned. This is the incredible Italian city of Palmanova, Italy, which in its day was the most forward-looking city in world history. It was designed from scratch to be the most defensible city imaginable in the year 1600, when, you know, the only way to assault a city was to charge up with a bunch of people with metal hats and hope that they could climb over on ladders or get in somehow. And of course they'd get boiling oil poured on them and they'd get shot with arrows and the like. And this is the optimal design for such a town to make the angles of attack least likely to be successful. In other words, this is the most defensible form. Unfortunately, right after the city was built, warfare changed and all these defenses were immediately moot. So they even had trouble getting anybody to live here. Alas, the fate of some design. A couple of quick things, and I'll move through this. I'll try to move through this fairly quickly. This is Andy Goldsworthy, who's a great British artist, but I include his work in design because what he does is he takes found objects, only found objects, and reassembles them into things that he takes nature and assembles them into things you would not find in nature. So this is a beautiful composition made only of leaves stitched together. This is a piece of cast ice hung around a tree. This is a collection of dandelions creating the contour of a rock outcropping. Now you might say, okay, now that, I'm sorry, I was with you until the Messerschmitt car, but what does this have to do with design? This is intentionality. This is willfully taking found elements and remaking them into something else altogether. Admittedly, the objective here is an artistic one, but I think it is very much a designed enterprise. One of the things about design that's really interesting, how many of you have seen this image? Very famous image. There we go. Good, our educational system is working properly. What's great about this image is, of course, you have to see either the old woman looking down like this or the young woman turned away like this. It's really hard to see both at the same time, right? You either see this as a mouth and that as the bottom of a nose, with the old woman looking down with the kerchief on her head, or you see this as a jawline of a woman with a bunch of black hair up here looking this way. But it's really hard to see both of them at the same time. And what's cool is that it requires a point of view. It requires that you actually make a conscious decision about which one you're going to look at. And that kind of intentionality we see in lots of things. I'm going to show you some German design here quickly. This is a Braun watch. Dieter Rams, a very, very famous German designer, designs all kinds of stuff for Braun. And sometimes we find inspiration for design in nature. And so when I ask you to sort of step back and zoom out a little bit about what the nature of the problem is that you're trying to solve, look at somebody. Can you imagine somebody just sort of daydreaming and looking at bubbles? Oh, wait a minute. They're a lighting designer, and they've designed these unbelievably cool, bubble-like, naturalistic hanging pendant lamps. Braun, of course, as probably most of you know, makes unbelievably good quality. They're like the Apple of kitchen and bathroom products. You know, super well designed, always coming up with new ideas. And of course, we have. It's hard to believe. You guys look at this and you say, "I'm sorry, wait a minute. That's the thing that was revolutionary? Not my iPad, not my 3/4-inch thick laptop with 500 gigabytes of memory. No, this thing with like 8 gigabytes or 8K of memory, maybe, or I don't know. It was hardly anything. Was the revolution. And last semester we had people read the biography of Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. It ended up not playing such a central role in the course, so I have not asked you all to read it this time for the course, but I got to tell you, I highly recommend the book. It's really interesting. I don't know if this current movie starring Ashton Kutcher, which I have not seen, is based on that book. I do not know the answer to that, but the book is great, and you'd really like it. And it's strange. I mean, this guy, Steve Jobs, was a genius, no question about it, but he was also really a jerk, like to a shocking degree. So it's kind of interesting it's an interesting read, both for the content about design and about business and about the evolution of computing and so forth, and marketing, of course, but also just as a human story. It's really quite interesting. What's also interesting is the relationship between Braun and Apple. Almost every cool Apple product was preceded by a Braun product very similar about 30 years earlier. So that's something to keep in mind. And the truth is, a lot of great design is riffing on great design that preceded it. That's not the same as plagiarism, I would say. It is acknowledgement of excellence and building on that excellence and trying to make it even better. So how do we get there? What are some ways to do it? Okay, now pay attention to this slide. These 8 words are going to be the core of what you're going to take out of this course. The first assignment that I'm not going to give you today, but I'm going to give you in a week or 10 days, is going to be about you writing a bit about each of these 8 words. And these 8 words are, again, they're not the only 8 words that describe the design process. They are not. But each one of these has real meaning when it comes to design as we're going to be talking about it. So these are going to come up in the questions that I ask our guests. They're going to come up in the examples that I give you. They're going to be ever present. So I really encourage you to be thinking about them right away and throughout the course. And I'm going to go through them very quickly right now. When we talk about context, we really mean a place or a system or a culture or an environment. It is the thing it's the battlefield. And now you're going to have to figure out what you're going to try and do on the battlefield, but it matters. So for example, this is perhaps the context for a race car, and this is the context for a Prius, okay? Question. The notion of understanding the question. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Problem seeking, questioning the question. This is something, we're going to be talking about question, which is sometimes almost interchangeable with the word problem for our purposes. We're going to be doing we're going to be talking a lot about that this term. So for example, if we ask the question, what is a car? Is it a horseless carriage? That's what it was initially. It was a carriage that simply didn't have horses on it anymore. My great-great-great-grandfather, I think, was a carriage maker in Pennsylvania in the 1900s, and he He saw that this was not going to be good for his business because they weren't going to be carriages forever if you didn't need to have the horses pull them. So they started to evolve into something maybe more of a livery vehicle. Then there was the question of, well, with a livery vehicle, by livery, I mean, that's still where someone else is driving you. If you think about the dawn of the car age, of course it was for the rich, and the rich were used to having somebody drive the carriage, and they sat in back. So the first cars, of course, were like that. There was a separate compartment for the person driving, because they probably still had the driver. They had a driver, and then they sat in the back. Well, suddenly, as cars got better, as car technology got better and they got more reliable, wait a minute, I've got an idea. I'm a rich guy. How about I drive the car? And I think that's the more typical situation today. That is, people are much more interested in the car as something to enjoy, not something that is simply taking them somewhere. So we see all kinds of cars. This is the inside of a BMW Z8, which is one of the cars that Henrik Fisker designed, who you'll meet on Monday. So what is a car? Is it a horseless carriage? Is it a livery vehicle? Is it a race car? Is it a commodity? Is a Prius, is your Prius just like my Prius? Is this more like a commodity, like a smart car? Or is it finally and ultimately infrastructure? Like Zipcar, right? That's not even your car. That's just part of the infrastructure, like the water or gas system or the bus system. Or like the ultra cool, how many of you have seen this? This is called the City Car, and it's being developed at MIT, and the head of the MIT City Car program is going to be a guest in this course halfway through. It's going to be great. This is a really interesting thing. This is basically hubway for cars. This is like racks of cars in your neighborhood. You just go and you take one, you use it, and you leave it at a rack in Somerville. You don't even have to bring it back to where you took it from. Interesting. So, on this notion of the question, questioning the question, and I will try to not touch my microphone, which I guess I am doing. I apologize. My minders are up in the balcony here, in case you're wondering. They're keeping track of me. So why do people buy cars? That's a completely different question than the one we just asked. Some of them buy them to be practical. Some of them buy them to convey the idea that they are strong, or that they are thoughtful, or that they're a good parent, or, well, I'll leave this one to your imagination. Another word that we have to think about is empathy. And this gets to the emotional nature of design that I was alluding to before. One of our guests last time is one of the best product and experience and brand designers in the United States. His name is Peter Dixon. He's the creative director at a big firm in New York. He's just a super smart guy. And I was having dinner with him. He's also on the board of our School of Architecture. I was having dinner with him a few months ago. And he said, George, I've studied design. He studied architecture. We both worked at a big architecture firm together for a while, and he's very good at that. But he said, the most important word for me these days, the most important thing to me as a designer is empathy. Empathy, being able to feel others' understanding of a situation, being able to walk in their shoes, being able to look at the world from another's perspective. It's hard to think of anything that is more important for a designer than understanding their audience, seeing things from someone else's point of view, testing responses. And whether you're in business school, engineering school, architecture school, this is a really important thing. So sometimes your audience is young hipsters, sure, of course. But sometimes it's old people. And, their relationships with computers or, I don't know, all kinds of stuff, as you know, if you have grandparents, as you know, their relationships to things are just plain crazy or different. Sometimes they're people from a different culture. And they will perceive things differently. And so when you design things, whether they are products services, experiences, whatever they are, you need to think about the world from other people's perspective, including that of babies. Okay. You probably aren't going to have to do this very much, right? In the immediate future, I hope. But they're an interesting subset of a demographic group, I have to tell you. It's hard to know what they're going to do. Iteration is another one of our 8 words. And this is also super important because design and design thinking is not a kind of one-time insight. It's like writing. You nearly always have to try out an idea, test it, see how it works, find out what's good, what's bad, go back, try it again. And that's you're going to see that's a really important part of this. Prototypes, testing, surveying, measuring, revising, beginning again. It's that cyclical nature that is what makes things better. And if you doubt me, these are the Apple products just in the last, 20 years. Okay? And just in your immediate, since you were in high school lifetime, this is, well, maybe not. Maybe the one on the far left was when you were in middle school, but, pretty recently. The iterations, the evolution, the testing, the making it better, the beta, the version 1, version 2, version 3, this is where the world really gets better. I love this. I have to tell you, this image is I suppose it's about iteration, but it's also just a really cool grid of information about how 5 random things have evolved over decades. Covers of George Orwell's 1984, how police cars have evolved, how the Queen Elizabeth's hats have evolved, how cornflakes boxes have evolved. The reason I include it is, of course, they are all iterations of the same thing as well. But this is perhaps more in keeping with really a design process kind of iteration. On the left, you see a preliminary sketch with some notes about the problems that the designer is trying to solve. In the middle, you see a more detailed, 3-dimensional, probably computer drawing. And on the right, you see an actual prototype. And that prototype is a thing you could sit down next to, open, test, make sure it works as you intend. And when it doesn't, you go back and you do another iteration, another version. Visualization. Now, this betrays a bit of my bias as an architect, probably. But visualization is super important because it allows us to see the whole from the parts, understanding the project from outside through narrative or movement or a story, or moving through a space, experience, or process. Let me give you some examples. This is a famous painting by a 19th century painter named Thomas Cole. It's completely a fantasy. It doesn't exist in reality in the slightest. It's called, The Architect's Dream, I think. It's all the great classical architecture in one scene. This is, crazy kind of architecture that doesn't exist now, but I suppose could. And with our contemporary digital visualization tools, we can kind of imagine almost anything in a very realistic light. And I thought this was interesting. And this is a perspective project in China where they're building so fast that this was only shared with me very recently, and this building probably already built. They don't screw around in China. They're building like there's no tomorrow. But there's also other kinds of visualization. Like data visualization, and I'm sure some of you maybe, anybody in here who's in computer science and at all? Yeah. So, data visualization, the intersection of design and big data is a huge field now. And this is the sort of large synthetic view that such views afford us. Innovation, understanding why things are the way they are, asking a new question to identify a new set of needs. This is along the lines of the famous old build a better mousetrap and they'll beat a path to your door. Some people say that what you need in a mousetrap is wine. I don't know. I have not seen that tested. But there's all kinds of different mousetraps, as you know, trying to solve different problems. Do you want to kill the mouse? Do you just want to catch the mouse? Do you want to chase the mouse away? There's all kinds of problems that have different kinds of solutions. And of course, the mousetrap can be conceived in different contexts. Metrics. How do we measure success? This goes back to the nature of the question or the nature of the problem you're trying to solve. How do you measure success? Well, sometimes you can actually just, it's dimensional. Other times it's things like customer satisfaction. Other times it's a process. And in this case, this is a diagram called user-centered design, but it shows a kind of cycle of testing and iteration. And what aspects of design can be quantified, because not all can, and for those that can't be quantified, how do you evaluate? How do you evaluate things, ephemeral things like beauty or this sort of thing? It's tricky because, of course, this doesn't fit in an Excel chart very well. Finally, leadership. This I've included since last time, and I think it's super important because one of the things that I can really share with you guys that you will take away and will be valuable in your academic life, but also in your careers, is the idea of the relationship between design and being a leader. Because, we hear the word leader all the time, and, if you get asked, would you like to be a good leader or not? Yeah, I guess I'd like to be a good leader. Why? What does it entail? Well, more than anything, it entails showing people a vision of the future that they haven't yet seen, and then showing them how to get there. So, that's simple, but it's completely real. It's true in almost any context. People cannot imagine what the next thing is. You have to help them understand what it is, communicate to them that it's important to get there, and then show them how. And probably in addition, make it in their interest to follow your advice. This is a great visionary sketch by the great American architect Frank Lloyd Wright for a prototypical new city called Broadacre City that would be a kind of new kind of suburb. And he included designs for lots of different kinds of houses and public buildings that would go here. But the idea is that everybody would be flying around, and Frank Lloyd Wright designed helicopters, as you see floating through this image. It was a vision of a world that did not exist in the 1930s, but that he imagined and tried to persuade people of. And actually, he built about 300 of these Usonian houses, which are the houses in this plan. This is Frank Lloyd Wright. Kind of a crazy person, which some super creative people are. This is one of the most... Frank Lloyd Wright, in my view, is in the same category as Michelangelo in terms of one of the greatest geniuses in the history, creative geniuses in the history of Western civilization. He's also nuts, I should add. Like, not necessarily somebody you want to have over for dinner, but really, really interesting. This is an early helicopter or flying device designed by, of course, Leonardo da Vinci. Way, way before the ability to build such things existed. Some more amazingly innovative sketches from da Vinci. And still yet another vision of a future world. This is the Garden City as conceived by Ebenezer Howard. So I'm going to finish this up very quickly with asking again the question, what is design? Well, it's sometimes as simple and beautiful as a measuring cup, or the multi-purpose feathers, or simply a gigantic, beautiful, mossy tree. But it's often things that can do more than one thing, like this sort of sculptural piece that doubles as a side table and magazine rack, or this inside-out salt and pepper shaker, or this very small, flat, 3-in-1 scanner, printer scanner, fax thing, or this kind of groovy digital keyboard projected on a surface, holographic keyboard. Or who knew that we needed a new kind of unicycle, right? I think this is amazing. I didn't know that was a problem we had. This designer did. This unbelievably kind of simple form here that turns out is an unbelievably complex storage unit for those of you who live in tiny apartments. What is this? Hard to know until we see, oh yes, it's a shower. It's an all-in-one shower unit. Wow. I didn't know that. So as Steve Jobs would say, let me tell you a story. The story begins with these 8 words. It asks questions. What is a music player? Is that a music player? Is it a piece of furniture? Is it kind of a portable piece of furniture? Is it a portable box? Is it a bunch of cassette tapes? You know, nice little simple cassette player? Or is it in a major Spike Lee style boombox? No. Finally, it becomes truly portable and becomes personal, and it's the Walkman. When I was in college, this was the unbelievably revolutionary device. You could listen to your own music, and somebody next to you could listen to theirs. It was the coolest thing. Uh-oh, and then they came out with this. And then this. Uh-oh, but even that's not enough, because then they came out with iTunes, and that wasn't enough, and they came out with Pandora, and then Spotify, and we realized that each one of these is, in a way, answering a different question. It's solving a different problem. And I want you guys to think about those sort of sequences of things, because each one seemed like the end of the road. Each one seemed like, wow, they've really nailed it. The Walkman. It's just like when I saw the portable phone in the 1980s that we've all seen, right? Wow, amazing, a portable phone. How could it be better than that? It's about this process. It's about asking these kinds of questions. We see it in a computer. In this evolution, I'm not going to bore you. This is the metaphor that Steve Jobs used about a computer. I want it to be as ubiquitous as a toaster. This is not a complicated piece of machinery that you need to study to know how to use. I want it in every house like a toaster. And of course, he's succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. These are the words that we're going to remember. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to be very quick, and we're almost done here. But for those of you who have ever been to Washington, D.C., you know, how many have been to Maya Lin's Vietnam Veterans Memorial? Okay, pretty powerful thing, huh? Regardless of your age or relation to that conflict. It's an amazing thing. By the way, Maya Lin was 20 years old when she designed that. She was an undergraduate student at Yale. And it's located, I don't know if you can see that map of the mall. It's not on center. It doesn't look like a monument, that's for sure. It's really just a wall, a V-shaped wall. But it's actually much, much more than that. It's about creating a public conversation about ambiguity. You dive down below grade. You walk down this slope thing, and before you know it, you're below grade, and you have to engage the wall. There's no getting around it. And sometimes it's unclear whether it's affirmative or subversive. Is it a gash in the nation's front lawn, or is it, reverential and connected to the other monuments on the mall? It's a new kind of memorial, is my point. It reinvented the relationship to the dead after wars. It really did. It's one of the most innovative things I've ever seen. Some friends of mine also did a memorial in Columbus, Indiana, which is also very cool for a different reason. Instead of being a giant stone monolith, and instead of being a series of columns, it's conceived as a giant monolith that then gets cut and sliced so that people can walk through it. So here you see people walking through that thing, its relationship to the sky, the rough exterior and the smooth interior. How people relate to it, not unlike the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in some ways. So this is a little bit of a reminder. And to conclude, it's a process. Design is a process. It's a thing. It's a method. It's a result. It's all those things. And we're going to look at a whole bunch of different kinds of design in this course. Next time we're meeting Henrik Fisker, who's just an amazing designer. We're going to have a great conversation, I think. And I look forward to seeing you here Monday at 11:45. Thank you very much.